Naomi Osaka froze mid-walk. A four-time Grand Slam champion who has performed under the brightest lights and loudest crowds in tennis suddenly stopped. Not because of a match or a point, but because of something she couldn't immediately understand. What she was seeing no longer felt like tennis, it felt bigger than the sport itself. Inside the Porsche arena, the atmosphere had already been different. Stuttgart, usually calm and structured, had shifted into something unexpected. Around 55,000 Filipino fans had arrived in the city, traveling from Frankfurt, Munich, and across Europe, wherever flights, trains, or long overnight journeys could take them. Hotels were full. Restaurants echoed with unfamiliar languages mixed with familiar laughter. Outside the arena, the streets were painted in waves of blue, red, and yellow. For a few days, it no longer felt like Germany, it felt like the Philippines had come to life. But even that wasn't the most striking part. What happened after the match made everyone pause. Eala had just lost 6-1, 6-4 to Leylah Fernandez. Another early exit. Her third straight first-round defeat. A result that normally sends players straight off court, heads down, looking for space and silence. That's what people expected. But that's not what happened. Instead of leaving quickly, Eala turned toward the crowd. At first, it was just one autograph. Then another. Then 10 more. And it didn't stop there. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour. She signed everything: caps, shirts, flags, posters. One fan even handed her an Olympic medal brought from home. She paused, smiled, and signed it too. She posed for photos without hesitation. She hugged children who seemed like they would remember that moment forever. She listened, really listened, to overseas Filipino workers who had saved for months, sometimes years, just to be there for a few hours. There was no hurry in her steps. No glance at her phone. No sign she wanted it to end. She was fully there, emotionally, physically, completely present in a moment most athletes would have walked away from. And that's when Osaka stopped. From a distance, she watched it unfold, the unfiltered connection between a player and her people. The cameras caught her reaction, first surprise, then quiet admiration, and finally something more subtle, almost reflective. Because even for someone used to global fame, this felt different. Music, then she said it, "I've never seen anything like this." And she meant it. Because this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about rankings, draws, or points. It was about belonging, identity, a player who, even after defeat, didn't step away but stepped closer instead. In that moment, the tennis world seemed to realize something it hadn't fully understood before: what surrounds Eala isn't ordinary. It isn't temporary. It's something deeper, harder to define, and even harder to measure. Naomi Osaka reportedly told someone on her team while still watching the scene unfold, she lost. She could have just walked away. But she stayed for almost an hour. That's special. And that was what made the moment land so strongly. Inside the Porsche arena, it stopped being about the scoreline. It stopped being about a 6-1, 6-4 defeat to Leylah Fernandez. What remained was something rarer in professional sport: an athlete choosing connection over convenience, presence over escape. The clip spread quickly. Within hours, it was everywhere: X, Instagram, YouTube, amassing millions of views. Fans from different countries, different sports, different backgrounds all reacted to the same thing. Not the loss, but the response. This is why we love Alex. Win or lose, she never forgets her fans, one post read. Another said, "Naomi's face says it all. Even champions are impressed." Because what Osaka witnessed wasn't a one-time moment. It's part of a pattern forming since Eala broke through on the global stage at the 2025 Miami Open. Since then, her matches haven't just been matches, they've become meeting points, gathering spaces. And much of that traces back to where she comes from. Eala has spoken openly about how difficult it was growing up in the Philippines with limited access to tennis, fewer courts, fewer resources, and far fewer opportunities than players in established tennis nations. For a long time, the sport simply didn't exist at scale. Now it's the opposite. "When I go back to Manila," she said, "it's hard to get courts, and that's a good thing. When I was younger, music, they were empty." That shift matters. Because for the Filipino diaspora, millions spread across Europe, the Middle East, and North America, Eala represents something bigger than tennis. She represents access where there was none, possibility where there used to be limits, a version of the sport that finally feels like it belongs to them too. That's why the atmosphere around her feels different. One veteran referee summed it up earlier this season: when players come from countries like the Philippines, the stadium starts to feel like a Davis Cup tie. National. Emotional. Loud. That's exactly what Stuttgart became. Those fans didn't just travel for a match. They traveled for identity, For pride, music, for representation. They weren't only cheering for Eala, they were cheering for the Philippines. They weren't just spectators, they were part of it. Flags in the air, songs echoing through the concourse, voices blending into something closer to a celebration than a post-match exit. And in the middle of all of it, Eala kept giving back. She didn't have to do that, one fan said, still emotional. She could have walked away. But she stayed. She hugged us. She thanked us. That's why we love her. That's the part that stayed with Naomi Osaka. Because Osaka understands the other side of that moment better than most. She's spoken openly about the weight of expectation, the pressure of global attention, and the mental toll of being constantly observed. She knows how hard it is to walk out after a loss, the instinct to retreat, to protect yourself, to disappear. And yet she watched Eala do the opposite. The video spread fast across X, Instagram, and YouTube. Fans slowed it down, replayed it, studied Osaka's reactions frame by frame. One clip showed her standing near the player's entrance, hand over her heart, eyes fixed on the scene. Another caught her turning to someone on her team, shaking her head slightly, half disbelief, half admiration. The comments flooded in. Naomi gets it. She knows what that connection means. This is why I love tennis. Not the trophies, the humanity. And when Osaka finally addressed it in a brief interview, her words made it clear why the moment had stayed with her. I was just watching her, she said. She lost a tough match. She could have been upset. She could have been frustrated. But she chose to be grateful. That's a choice, and it's not an easy one. She paused for a moment, careful, like someone speaking from experience rather than observation. I've been in that position. I've lost matches where all you want to do is leave. To not talk. To not see anyone. And that's where the real meaning of Stuttgart sits. Not in the scoreline. Not in the headlines. But in that decision, to stay, to connect, to give something back even when you feel like you have nothing left. That's what Osaka recognized. And that's why she couldn't look away. I've lost matches and just wanted to disappear, she added. Seeing her handle it with so much grace, it was inspiring. It reminded me why I play. That line didn't just describe a moment, it amplified it. Within hours, Osaka's reaction to Eala spread across every platform, adding momentum to something already echoing through the tennis world. Fans weren't just reacting to Eala's gesture anymore, they were connecting it to Osaka's honesty, her history, her vulnerability. Two champions, two different journeys, one shared understanding. Music, this is what sport is supposed to be. Naomi knows, that's why this hits different. The responses kept building because Osaka's perspective carries weight. Her decision to step away in 2021 to protect her mental health reshaped how athletes talk about pressure, expectation, and visibility. She's lived the reality behind the spotlight, which is why her reaction mattered. What she saw in Stuttgart wasn't just kindness. It was strength, the kind that doesn't appear in rankings or trophies. When she finally said, "She's special. I hope she knows that. I hope she never loses that," it didn't sound like casual praise. It sounded like recognition. From someone who understands exactly how hard it is to stay open in a sport that constantly asks you to harden yourself. And that's what made the moment bigger than a viral clip. It became a reminder of what tennis can be at its best, not just competition, but connection. For Eala, it reinforced something that's becoming harder to ignore. She's already one of the biggest draws in women's tennis, not because of Grand Slam titles or a top 20 ranking, but because of something far less tangible and far harder to manufacture: authenticity. She shows up fully, win or lose. I always make a point to be grateful, she once said. Coming from where I come from, I've seen real struggle. I've seen how much people sacrifice. That perspective shapes everything she does. It explains why she stayed on court for nearly an hour after a loss. Why she listens when fans speak to her. Why those interactions don't feel transactional, they feel real. Because in a sport often defined by results, she's offering something else, a reason to care beyond the scoreboard. I've seen struggle, she added. Even if I haven't lived all of it myself, I understand what it means, and I appreciate what I have. That mindset isn't just something Eala says. It's something she shows. And in Stuttgart, it was impossible to miss. It's also why Naomi Osaka noticed. Because what unfolded there wasn't just about tennis, it was about connection. Real, unfiltered, deeply rooted in identity. For the Filipino diaspora, Eala represents something bigger than rankings or results. She represents proof that someone from Manila can step onto the biggest stages in the sport and not just compete, but belong. And that matters when you zoom out. The Philippines has over 115 million people. Add millions more abroad, nurses in Dubai, engineers in California, caregivers in Canada, and you have a global community that, for decades, didn't have a central figure in tennis to rally behind. Now they do. That's why the atmosphere around her feels different. As one veteran referee put it, when players come from countries like the Philippines, matches start to feel like the Davis Cup, national, emotional, unified. That's exactly what Stuttgart became. Those fans weren't just cheering for Eala. They were cheering for their flag, their identity, their shared story. They sang music, they waved flags. They turned a tournament into something that felt like home. And Eala gave that energy right back. She didn't have to do that, one fan said through tears. She could have left, but she stayed. She hugged us. She thanked us. That exchange between player and people is what makes this moment linger. But the tour doesn't pause for emotion. The clay season is only just getting started, and it's about to test both players in very different ways. Next comes the Madrid Open, April 21 to May 3, where Eala enters directly into the main draw of a WTA 1000 event. No qualifiers, no buffer, no easing in. After that, the Italian Open in Rome, May 6 to 18, another elite field, another step up in intensity. And then the biggest stage of all on clay, the French Open in Paris. That's where everything converges: momentum, expectation, pressure. Because between now and Paris, every match matters. Every performance adds another layer to the narrative building around her. The fans already believe. The schedule ahead will decide whether the results start to match that belief. The clay season now stretches toward its defining test. The French Open, concluding on June 7 in Paris, looms as the ultimate proving ground, where stories are either confirmed or exposed under pressure. For Naomi Osaka, the road there has been far less stable. The four-time Grand Slam champion is still searching for rhythm in 2026, with only a handful of wins so far. But writing her off would be premature. Players of her caliber don't need perfect form to become dangerous, they just need a moment. And if the draw ever brings her across the net from Eala, it wouldn't just be another match. It would feel like something bigger. Two players at different points in their journey, one established, tested, and familiar with the weight of global expectation, the other rising quickly, carried by belief that grows louder with every tournament. The crowd would feel it. The moment would feel heavier than the round. Because what connects them now goes beyond rankings or results. That moment in Stuttgart, Osaka watching, Eala staying, will outlive the clay season. It will resurface in interviews, highlight reels, and conversations about what modern tennis is becoming. Not just a sport of winners and losers, but a stage for something more human. That's why the clip resonated. It captured two athletes, two champions in different places, linked by a shared understanding of pressure, expectation, and the responsibility of representing something larger than themselves. For Eala, it reinforced what's already becoming clear: she's one of the most compelling figures in women's tennis today, not because of titles or rankings, but because of authenticity. "I always make it a point to be grateful," she said. And in Stuttgart, that wasn't just something she said. It was something you could see, in every pause, every smile, every moment she chose to stay. For Osaka, it struck something deeper. Her own journey, marked by immense success but also very public struggles with mental health and the weight of fame, gives her a perspective few others have. She knows what it feels like to carry expectations that never switch off, to stand in front of millions and still feel alone. So when she watched Eala lean into that moment instead of pulling away from it, it wasn't just impressive. It was meaningful. Because it reflected a choice she understands better than most. And that's why this wasn't just a viral clip. It became a reminder that even in a sport defined by results, the moments people remember most are the ones that reveal who you are. I've been in that position, lost matches and just wanted to disappear. Seeing her handle it with so much grace, it was inspiring. That reflection from Naomi Osaka says as much about her own journey as it does about Eala. Because what she recognized wasn't just kindness, it was composure under pressure. The kind that doesn't show up in stats, but quietly shapes careers over time. And it also revealed something bigger. The bond between Eala and her supporters isn't typical. For the Filipino diaspora, she isn't just a rising player, she's representation. A signal that someone from Manila can step onto the biggest stages in tennis and belong there. That matters when you consider the scale. The Philippines has over 115 million people, with millions more living abroad, nurses in Dubai, engineers in California, caregivers in Canada. For years, that global community didn't have a single figure in tennis to rally behind. Now they do. And that's why the atmosphere around her feels different. As one veteran referee put it, matches involving players from countries like the Philippines start to feel like the Davis Cup. Fans aren't just supporting an athlete, they're backing a nation. That's exactly what happened in Stuttgart. The fans weren't just cheering for Eala. They were cheering for the Philippines. Flags in the air, songs in the stands, a shared identity turning a routine tour stop into something far more emotional. And Eala, win or lose, met that energy with something just as powerful: gratitude. Now the story moves forward. The clay swing continues with the Madrid Open, then Rome, and ultimately the French Open in Paris. For Eala, this stretch will test whether belief can begin to translate into consistent results. For Osaka, it's about rebuilding rhythm in a 2026 season that has been uneven but far from finished. And then there's